If I had to switch characters with another co-star, it would have to be Galadriel.
Good job Galadriel didn't say that in reverse. Pretty sure that'd be a hate crime.
Mine would actually probably be Queen Miriel. I'd love to cosplay as her.
No, Galadriel, don't do it. You know what the laws are like over here. You'd be fine if you did the canonical version, but not Rings of Power. Life's been tough for Rings of Power as the season's gone on. We kept getting more bad news with sharp decreases in viewership from season 1 compared to season 2, and then that compounded as we had the rather horrific episodes of 3 and 5, to the point where despite crowing about the viewership numbers of the series, Luminate reported that Rings of Power has fallen to number 4 when it came to minutes watched. 3-episode premiere, it managed to place second, but with the first full week of episode 4 and the first day of episode 5, it only managed to hit half the minutes watched. This caused it to place 4th, despite such epic series as The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and only slightly ahead of The Worst Ex Ever. You know, that massive culture-defining series that we've all heard about. You can barely go on YouTube without a video of that popping in your feed, I'm sure.
It's a swear, which means, ah, come on!
And as time's gone on, the fanbase has definitely been split over Rings of Power, generally deciding which is the best of the worst episodes. Focusing on Numenor and Anatar somewhat improves Rings of Power. You know, when we actually get down to the stories about the canonical events that happened, rather than waffling on about some Harfoots in a desert somewhere. Some people thought that of episode 5 was the best in the series. For me though, I'm far more in line with the Forbes title, that episode 5 was the worst episode and another slog through a jumbled Middle Earth.
Season 2 in one word.
Grach. It's Elvish for...
I'd quite like to try and pull off an elf, but I don't think I've got it in me to do that.
Although so far, the best thing to come out of the series is definitely the nickname Evil Barbie Sauron. Looking at the pictures, it's hard to disagree. And I look forward to seeing what Evil Barbie's gonna get up to from here. There were other marketing clips that you saw at the start, which were far better. I've seen many interviews where they almost set up, or at least left the door open for the cast to come out and attack the fans. And by and large, they resisted those attempts and instead talked about the positives of the series. This is clearly intentional, alongside Rings of Power's more character, personality-based marketing, doing videos about which do you prefer, this or that, and behind-the-scenes interviews or scenes.
I'm a puppeteer doing some object manipulation.
Where you found out that Celebrimbor fought the Jolly Green Giant.
Take up. Sorry.
Or my personal favourite, this question and answer session video.
These questions, they're good questions, but they're designed to create beef.
Oh, they were certainly designed to get beef. There were some more light-hearted options, such as who would you prefer to have a drink with?
Durin.
Prince Durin.
Tom Bombadil.
Morfydd Clark, easily the standout, most accidentally funny person in the question. Always had a different or most bizarre answer, like when asked,
If I could keep anything from props and wardrobe.
Morfydd's answer is so bizarre, she even confuses evil Barbie Sauron sitting next to her.
I'm quite into like doorknobs and stuff, and there's quite a lot of like, if you look at those little details, like in Numenor, they're all like octopusy.
I'm sorry. Either the doorknobs were big fans of James Bond.
So you are the mysterious octopus.
Or those Numenorians really loved a gangbang.
Dunno. It's just me.
Doorknobs.
And she's really not helping the dark evil Barbie brand. When asked,
From Rings of Power, I would cosplay as...
she gives this description of Hellbrand.
Dark Sauron one where you've got that little bow in your hair.
Have you ever thought of Sauron having a bow in his hair? No one had before, but now we've got evil Barbie on the scene. There is no brakes on this train.
Quite
Quite
hard
hard
to pull
to
off
pull off.
without help, getting that bow tied.
And from listening to Celebrimbor talk, he definitely wants to be running one. I mean, at SDCC, we did have this question.
So many of us in the LGBT community see ourselves in Tolkien's writings. Any chance we'll see ourselves on the show?
Maybe you have already.
And I think we have our answer to who that was.
From Rings of Power, I would cosplay as...
Benjamin Walker, without a doubt.
It's the outfits, it's the authority, and it's the sword, or the spear.
Yes, Celebrimbor seems to have a thing for the one, the only
Gil-Gadaddy in a coffee shop.
And the best bit is, Gil-Gadaddy seems to know.
Do you want to play my part?
You get really dirty in this season.
Who knows, if Sauron can have a bow in his hair, maybe that'll get into season 3.
Gil-Gadaddy.
Throbbing.
Besides that, we find out that Disa and Muriel would be a meeting of the minds.
Disa, a royal meeting of the minds. Ooh, royal.
Just seems like you two are a lot alike. You're both literal geniuses.
And obviously, such great intellects require specific beverages.
I would love a cup of tea and a hot milk
Milk for the child.
Stop, please stop.
with nori.
I can only assume nori will be in the milk. It's extra protein. One of the most bizarre, although probably should have been predictable answers, is when they asked which character Theo would like to cosplay as.
Galadriel? There's a lot of Galadriels around.
A lot of Galadriels around.
Really brings a whole new meaning to breastplate. But then we find out that Sauron, he's flirting with that blonde. He's telling her, you look just like Galadriel. He's definitely flirting with her, isn't he?
He's kind of flirting with her a little bit.
Well, yeah, there's an interesting kind of tension there, yeah. We'll kind of see where it goes, but
No, they kind of rebuff it as if, well, he's not actually doing that, so is she simply another tool for Sauron's plans? Is it Galadriel's daughter in Celeborn is hiding under the stairs for 1,000 years? Let's be honest, with Rings of Power, literally anything is possible.
I'd like to say I could pull off an elf, but I really can't, so...
There is no level of trash we won't sink to.
Valinor.
Mordor.
Mordor. No, Valinor. Sorry, I got the two mixed up.
I really think that clip exemplifies Deez's marketing strategy change between Season 1 and Season 2. When they've switched to this more personality-based without attacking the fans, she's actually really likeable. Of course, none of the more likeable personality-based marketing from Amazon makes that much of a difference when the journalists, they just haven't got the message. It just doesn't matter if Rings of Power isn't faithful to Tolkien's lore. They will literally gaslight you in any way possible. It's changed Tolkien's lore in multiple ways, but it still remains faithful. What? Can't just say contradictory things and assume others will accept the fact. That's not how it works.
Did you take a stupid pill with your breakfast this morning, Admiral?
Well, it's not completely faithful, but it is faithful, even though it's changed it in multiple ways. The Rings of Power has been remarkably faithful to the adaptation, but has also diverged significantly from the story. There is a level of reading this stuff where you're like, maybe I'm the insane one, because they're certainly making me that way. Tolkien wanted adaptations to retain the spirit of his story. The Rings of Power isn't perfect, but it does honor these key themes. Really? What, like Thirst Trap Sauron or making evil Barbie with a bow in his hair? Tolkien would be proud. And it is weird when, like, well, the Rings of Power is making the world pick up Tolkien's books. His sales are up. Great. Do you think that'll help or hinder the show, though? I'd need to know. Because one thing that has happened is a lot of people are reading it and they know this has nothing to do with the canon. So what that does allow is all the people, the same with the Acolyte, that want to like the show, they start making up their own future stories, which are inevitably better than what they get. So they end up disappointed when the series is over, but really enjoy it while it's on. One of these theories, probably the most horrific, is Rings of Power foreshadowing a character transforming into a Nazgul. I'm like, well, you know, I could see that. I think the biggest issue is they think it's Theo. Theo's fall would let Rings of Power explore a new side to the Nazgul. Who wants a new side to them? You want them to remain what they are. There's only one new side I think Theo would actually bring to the Nazgul in the first place.
They are so sick. I mean, dude. Weird, they're so sick. Like, how sick it looked, see how dope that they actually are.
But I like these videos to bring entertainment value and make everyone a little bit happier in the world. That's why I've got some good news for you. Even Screen Rat admit that Merdania's character isn't from the Lord of the Rings books, and that means one specific thing. Because she's an original Rings of Power character, and as such isn't shown during Lord of the Rings, it does mean she's very likely dead. She'll likely die during the Siege of Eregion. I think that really would be the happy ending for the series, because any other theories about her character are far worse. Why does she look like Galadriel? And why were the showrunners so desperate to say that Sauron wasn't flirting with her? They were more than happy to have other characters flirting.
I'd quite like to try and pull off an elf.
Milk for the child.
Stop, please stop.
But I don't think that gaslighting is going to work. Titles like The Rings of Power's explanation for why there are 19 rings, it makes more sense than Tolkien's. I'm sorry? The only reason the entire thrice perfected thing came around is because 3 people stood around a bowl and just said it once. This is worse than when Rebel Moon mistakenly thought that grain was important and then it became the key point of the second movie just before they remembered they didn't actually need it in the first place. But no, now we have overpowered Tolkien's writing itself. The weird thing about Screen Rant is, on the one hand, they'll come out and go, yeah, this really stupid thing improves on Tolkien, and then they'll immediately flip over to the other side and go, they are ruining Galadriel, aren't they? They've made her an idiot in this show, so we're simultaneously ruining Galadriel, improving on the rings, killing off original characters, and that is why we're actually faithful to Tolkien's writing. I guess one of the ways you can maintain access to a studio is to just say everything. Really confuse them about whether you're positive or negative about the show. Because you know who has given up entirely on Rings of Power? Yeah, The Guardian. Is it hell on Middle-earth? The Rings of Power fails to spin streaming gold. The most expensive TV show ever, but the reviews are disappointing and audiences are staying away. Talking about the second season, a Guardian critic wrote, it quite often isn't anywhere near good. There are moments in almost every episode where I found myself laughing into my sleeve at how inept it is. Dialogue is stilted, filled with these narrative, clunky, ham-handed coincidences. And then they bring up the Tolkien professor, who says that season 1 asked a lot of people. It asked for a lot of patience because it was boring, dull, and nothing happened. And asked people to invest before they were fully drawn in. Didn't do anything. I don't know where this modern idea came from, that you can't very quickly introduce characters and make you like them. You can, it just requires more talent than dragging it out over 8 hours and still not caring about them at the end. But clearly a lot of people were not willing to do that. A lot of people weren't willing for the patience the series deserve.
You mock that which is sacred.
I mock that which is absurd.
Maybe it was just trash, mate. But the Tolkien professor thinks the second series is much better. Other critics argue that the show is not faithful to Tolkien's source material, but Olsen sees that as awkward and difficult. The self-named Tolkien professor sees sticking to the source material as awkward. Sorry? I'm not a Wheel of Time professor, but I could very easily have gone through that book and just told you which scenes to cut out and how to merge those same character motivations into other scenes. It would have been incredibly easy. But if you're not interested in the source material and instead you want to make your own art, rather than telling somebody else's story, you want to use that as an excuse to tell your own, then I can understand how sticking to the source material could be seen as awkward and difficult. The whole point of watching an adaptation is you're watching a particular person or a particular set of people's vision for the story, and of course that vision might be different from your own. This could be true in sort of the tone or the presentation. The lines may be delivered a different way, or an actor's facial features may not look how you imagine them personally. You know what would stay the same though? The pissing events! Events are objective. It is reality. It doesn't care about your individual perception, despite what a lot of people would tell you nowadays. But there are some times where you're reading through these articles, you're like, are you taking the piss? As I harbour no ill will to people that like Rings of Power. If you like it, you like it. That's absolutely fine. I have no problem with people's preferences for television. The thing is, there are those among the journalistic class who seem to disagree. When they say, if you love Rings of Power, watch Prime Video's other phenomenal fantasy series, Wheel of Time. And I'm like, why? Why do you want Rings of Power fans to suffer? I don't care if they're the living embodiment of the modern audience. Don't subject them to Wheel of Time. I wouldn't be surprised if making somebody watch Wheel of Time was against the Geneva Convention. Cruel and unusual punishment. And once you've read a lot of these articles, there isn't a lot that can surprise you or shock you. You've seen every bad take. But there is one article that made me almost fall out of my chair. And that is that Polygon actually made a good point. And when they're going Rings of Power is speedrunning its most tragic plotline, and it's making the Numenorians look big stupid, I'm like, yes. I have to admit, I do like Pharazôn as he stands in the series. This guy, though, what an idiot. The nation's cultural shift from divine devotion to invading heaven occurred over the course of 2,800 years, but the show is doing it in a single generation, and Sauron hasn't even finished the rings. It didn't have to be this way. There's a version of this show in which some of the leads, Sauron, the Stranger, Galadriel, Elrond,
Gilgadaddy,
Arendelle, Adar, remain consistent in each series, where other characters are a rotating cast of individuals that would give us an insight into how societies change over time, and why the shorter-lived races might resent their immortal neighbors. And it would make Rings of Power a significantly different show. This is something I suggested in season 1, possibly before season 1. When everyone found out you were crushing the timelines, it was obviously going to be a bad idea. You were obviously going to need to destroy the canon to make it happen. And this is the easiest way to fix it. You could have recast actors while keeping other casts the same. And this has been done in plenty of other series before, where you do time jumps over episodes or series. I remember the Steven Spielberg series, Taken, that did it. That literally followed aliens coming to Earth across multiple generations. It works fine. But for that, you have to respect the intelligence of the audience and that they can keep track of it in their heads. And Rings of Power definitely comes across as assuming its audience is too stupid to understand something like that. Although, depending on your Twitter algorithm, you might also lose respect for them. I think the strangest fan theory that they've come up with is, what is the monster underneath Khazad-dûm? It's like, don't you know? Look, I know Rings of Power destroys canon, but surely it can't break this. We've seen through multiple series marketing, they keep showing the Balrog. It's gotta be the Balrog. There was even something fell down next to a Balrog in season 1. Is it a Balrog? Some fans don't think so. All they saw was ripples on the water in front of it, and went, well, it must be the Watcher, the tentacle creature. Strange things living in the pools and the hearts of the mountains. No, I'm pretty sure that's just meant to be Jesus singing, and it was a Balrog. The ripples were simply there to show sound waves. Anything else, and you're probably giving the showrunners too much credit by reaching beyond their capability.
I'm so sorry, Ian. I'm so sorry.
And it's a problem we've seen time and time again, including from the showrunners. Oh, well, if you're just critics, well, obviously, you're just trolls or patently evil or whatever else they want to try and spin out to excuse their own incompetence. Forbes came to the defense of that. Tolkien fans can't stand the Rings of Power. It's not just trolls. No, all of them. And the showrunners trying to talk about Rings of Power TV fans as the Fellowship. Very transparent. The funny thing is when he goes, it's a clever jab. It's like, to describe that as clever is particularly easily pleased. Payne likens Amazon's production to the struggles faced by Frodo across Middle-earth, which I do find a bit silly. It's a TV show, not a quest to end tyranny and destroy a great and powerful evil. The thing is, to a true believer, it is. It's just like all the comments from season 1, where it's like, no, this is the first, we need to replace these people. We're opening up the entire universe of TV and fantasy to a new range of people that have just been excluded and oppressed throughout history.
My colour representation.
Are not many women in it.
I, as an activist,
We are both activists.
This represents progression. To be part of a redress of balance is an honour.
To them, the TV show isn't just an adaptation of a book. It is literally a quest to end tyranny and destroy a great and powerful evil. And that great and powerful evil would be tradition, traditional values. It would be those of foundations of English culture and the cultural works that sprang from that, which would be Tolkien's writing himself. It is the need to destroy a great and powerful evil which drives them to modernize things for the modern audience with modern values. To Forbes, it might just be another TV series, but to true believers, to the people that believe in modern values, it is more. It's a necessary action for them. Now, of course, in Hollywood, whether people actually believe that or whether they're just doing it as a grift for more money or because it's the done thing, probably depends on who you are on an individual basis. But it also doesn't really matter. Whether you're going along with it because it's the thing to do in Hollywood or you're going along with it because you're a true believer who wants to, either way, the outcome is the same. And so it's kind of irrelevant if you believe in the values as long as you obey them and implement them. This show finds itself at the center of a never-ending culture war. Lickspittles at various publications have taken a similar approach when responding to critics of the series, though I'm more sympathetic to the show's creators than journalists. Take The Mary Sue. It's yet another series that people online want to hate on just because, I guess. I don't get it. The show is fun to watch. They pose a question here, one the author admits they don't know. You may think the following paragraphs would dig deeper into understanding the complaints better. You'd be wrong. The purpose of this post is to create villains, not understand them or strengthen arguments against them, but simply to paint them in the worst light possible. Yes, and I remember the villains in that article. Men. Specifically described critics of the show as angry men. It's one of those times where no matter how hard you try and dissemble what you're actually talking about, your intention shines through in the words you use.
Powerful women, they make people cross.
The villains in this morality play are quickly placed in various deplorable baskets. They're just complaining about inclusion. They are all entirely male, of course. We get baffling arguments like a no true Scotsman. And while we don't know what Tolkien would have thought, based on everything he wrote about adaptations when he was alive, I suspect he would have been horrified by this series. Talking about the estate being part of it is among the flimsiest arguments I've ever encountered. It is either an example of staggering ignorance or an attempt to hoodwink us, which fits nicely with all the gaslighting going on. We are informed that angry people are just ruining the show for everyone else. This is a perplexing stance. If you want to enjoy Rings of Power, just enjoy it. I like pineapple on pizza, you animal. Then he talks about how the entire point is just to drum up anger because that way you'll go and visit the article and click on it and stuff. The problem is it's inauthentic. There's no actual argument here. It's just a vague broad stroke against an amorphous other. I do disagree with him in this part. I know there's no argument here, but that's because it was written by an absolute retard. It wasn't that there wasn't an argument there because it was some really intellectual advanced tactic to get you to click on an article. It was just because it was driven by emotion rather than intelligence. That article was written based on feelings and projection because you can't understand somebody else's point, so she projected her own mental state onto the people that don't like the show. She likes the show for these reasons, and so if you don't like the show, you must not like the show for those reasons, and that makes you bigoted and blah 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 because I like all of these categories, and that must mean you don't like all of these categories. It's too shallow and too strident and too predictable, and it's like, yes, but quite frankly, that's because you're more intelligent than the author, which often has the side effect of overestimating other people because you assume everyone's like you. Probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a human. No, the one thing you should get when you read enough journalistic articles, we are not equal. Is it some deep deep-rooted issue that people can't handle embracing their nerdy sides to be made fun of. I find this an incredibly revealing paragraph. People who were mocked before, the mainstream, have now gotten their greedy mitts on every piece of nerd culture that can be exploited. This leads to barely resembling the source material, and we are met with finger-wagging, gaslighting, and all manner of scorn. It's just history repeating itself. Then, of course, he has to fall down, and it's like, oh, well, you know, there really are bigots and trolls out there, but you can't just lump everyone into that basket. And it's like, okay, at that point, your argument just falls off a cliff. Overall, Eric Kane wrote an incredible article that really summarizes a lot of the problems with the whole idea that if you don't like Rings of Power, you're just trolls. And it's a great response to the Mary Sue article and well worth a read. It's just that the moment you start giving an inch, you lose. Because as he said, they're not authentic, they're not honest. Nothing is based in objective reality or truth for them. It's all simply about feelings. What makes them feel good? And basically embracing and enforcing a new moral system and value system into entertainment. You're not good because of your deeds. You're not good because of what you do. You're good because of what you are. And their brains are incapable of looking at the world from any other perspective. But this is the difference between one side and the other. But one thing that I can appreciate about Eric Kane is he's honest. I can read his article, agree with some of it, disagree with other parts of it, but you know that he means what he says when he writes it down. This is now something that's incredibly rare across journalism as a whole. What I've said about Eric Kane there, I can't say about the majority of the articles I read when I was making this video. Most of them didn't seem to come from any specific worldview or point of principle, because it wasn't about principles, it was about goals. I want Rings of Power to succeed, so I'm going to write articles about Rings of Power being amazing. Why so many of them are nonsense and just like, there's no way you can believe this. We have an end target in mind and we write towards it. Rather than something like Eric's piece where it felt more like he started with information and then drew logical conclusions from it, which is how you're supposed to do things. And it's probably one of the most interesting things about the fallout from media is across the IPs, it becomes very obvious who's telling the truth, who's being honest, and who's just trying to maintain access. Because I don't care how low your standards are. There's no way somebody likes all of this crap. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe. More videos like this in the future, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.